Life is all about stories. As each one of us goes to the dentist, gathers with family over the holidays, runs over a squirrel with a car, or gets passed over for a promotion at work, we are creating a story about the things that we have done, the places we have been, everything that has happened to bring us to the place where we are today. Each of these stories is full of ups and downs and surprises, both mundane and world-changing, and each of these stories has many characters that all contribute to the story in some small or great way. Every person you have encountered has a piece of that story that only they know, and without that piece, the story would be completely different. A collection of books known as the Monogatari Series, along with an anime adaptation of the same name, obsesses over this phenomenon. Ever since I discovered the series a couple years ago, it has become one of my favorite pieces of fiction. It has left a deep impression on me. I have found that it is impossible to express all that the Monogatari series means to me, or all the ways it has impacted my life. This show raises many difficult questions, such as whether it is possible to help someone without having a self-seeking purpose, or how best to navigate a relationship ending or ceasing to be what it once was. The question, or really the group of questions on which I decided to focus this video, have to do with human identity. The Monogatari series deals extensively with this topic, and if it has not directly influenced my views, it has certainly cemented what I believe about the nature of human identity. If I accomplish nothing else in this video, I hope that I will at least convince you that the Monogatari series is worth watching. Before I really begin, I should probably give a brief overview of the plot of the show, or at the very least, the basic concept. I generally despise exposition dumps. Seeing is almost always better than being told, but it is also usually the most efficient way to get people up to speed, so here it goes. The Monogatari series is about a boy named Araragi Koyomi, who became a vampire over spring break. Since then, he has turned back into a human, but now he constantly encounters apparitions and mythological creatures that are haunting the people in his life. Near the end of the Monogatari series, at the beginning of the section titled Zoku Owarimonogatari, in the morning after his high school graduation, Araragi Koyomi has an identity crisis. He realizes that in that moment he exists in a limbo where he does not have a determined identity. He just graduated from high school, so he is no longer a high school student. He has yet to receive his college entrance exam results, so he is not a college student. He doesn't have a job, so he isn't an employee either. In that particular moment, he finds himself in a position that lacks any sort of structure or purpose. He ponders what is left when everything he thought determined who he was is stripped away, and what he finds is himself. Araragi Koyomi. Nothing more, nothing less. As he brushes his teeth, he notices something strange in the mirror. His reflection stops following his movements. He reaches out to touch the mirror, and as his fingers make contact, he is sucked through the mirror into a parallel world. At first, nothing seems to have changed, but as he examines his surroundings more closely, it becomes apparent that something is off. His sister, who is tall, is now short. A girl who used to be quiet and shy is now loud and rude. An elementary schooler now appears to be in college, and so on for nearly every person he knows. Just after determining that he is no other than Araragi Koyomi, that he is the source of his own identity, he is thrust into a mirror dimension where each person has had some aspect of their appearance or personality reversed. In some regard, everyone is a mirror image of themselves, except for Araragi. He remains the same, so his identity should be unchanged, right? And yet, almost immediately after arriving in this strange new world, he begins to question who he is. He is Araragi Koyomi, but who is Araragi Koyomi? If he truly is in a mirror dimension inhabited by the mirror images of the people he knew, where is his mirror image, and what is that person like? Did his mirror image take his place in the real world? If he were to meet his mirror self, who would be the real Araragi? The only reassurance he has of his own identity is his memory, but his memory is of a different world, and he has memories of the people he encounters in this world that they don't have, and they seem to have memories of him of which he has no recollection. He begins to doubt even his own memories. How does he know his memories weren't fabricated and he spontaneously sprang into existence the moment he entered this world? He has memories of the world he came from, but no one else shares those memories. If Araragi can't even be sure of his own memories, he certainly can't be sure of his identity. For quite some time, I have been thinking through some issues related to the question of identity. Here are some of my observations. What makes you who you are cannot be boiled down to any one thing. All of your memories, your dreams and desires, your interests and hobbies, your mistakes and shortcomings, your successes, your failures, the sum total of your experiences, every single event in your life, everything contributes to who you are as a living human being. Take even one minute detail away, and it is possible to question whether you are the same person. If something about you changes, how do you know you didn't cease to exist and someone nearly identical to you took your place? Your memories might be unchanged, but how do you know you are the same person, or for that matter, that your memories actually happened? This happens to be an important question considered in philosophy. A human being appears to be something that persists through time, but at each successive moment, something about that human changes. Cells die and new ones are produced, hairs fall out, scrapes and bruises are accumulated and healed, moods change, and different thoughts constantly vie for attention. The physical state of your body is constantly changing through alterations in internal chemistry and the cycle of replenishing and dispelling matter. Having a soul that remains the same even while the body changes would solve this problem of identity, but then we are faced with more questions. What exactly is the soul, and does it really never change? I could spend some time attempting to answer those questions about the soul, but instead I will return to something I have already looked at that may provide a different solution: memory. Granted, memory is not enough to provide a foundation for identity because it is error-ridden and easily doubted, but memory does have one advantage: it persists through time. You know you are the same person moment to moment because you have memories that last for more than a moment. I know of a couple objections that can be made to the statement that memory is a crucial part of identity. First, what if all your memories are fabricated? And second, what if two different people have identical memories? In the first case, everything you remember is a lie, which means that the you that you remember is a fake and never existed in the first place. In the second scenario, how could we distinguish the people who share memories? Both would believe they were the same person, and we would have no way of telling who is correct. Both of these objections can be answered in the same manner. How do you actually live your life? A good litmus test for the value of a philosophical theory is whether it is possible to live as if that theory were true. Is it possible to live your life while at the same time believing that your memory is a lie? You would never forget where you left your keys or phone again because you never had keys or a phone in the first place. Your schedule also suddenly becomes free because you never put anything on your calendar, much less met anyone to do things with. And aside from not having any family or friends, you aren't even sure of your own name. That could be a lie too. It just is not possible to live as if your memories are a lie. Sure, you forget stuff and misremember details, but on the whole, memory is trustworthy. Likewise, if you ever met a person who claimed to have the same memories as you and could spout details about your life that no one else should know, you would be pretty freaked out and have a lot of questions, but you wouldn't think that person was you. Maybe some sort of clone or shape-shifting mind-reading alien, but not the same person as you. I have never experienced anything like this, but I expect I would brush it off as a weird experience and go about my life as before. Strictly speaking, I have not given a deductive rebuttal of those objections, but then again, I am not so sure that they need a rigorous counter-argument in the first place. The value of philosophy lies in its ability to uncover and explain the world and our experiences as it supplements and informs the way we live our lives. If a theory does not contribute to this, then it doesn't take much effort to conclude that the theory has little practical value. Memory, it would seem, is important, maybe even vital for establishing identity. But is it enough? Is all you are a collection of memories? In addition to memory, action also contributes to identity, because what you do is a reflection of who you are. Or at least that is something I am tempted to believe. In Nisemonogatari, one of the earlier parts of the Monogatari series, the question arises whether it is better to be a good person who does good things, or a bad person who does good things. The former does good things because it is her nature. This person cannot help but to do good things. On the other hand, the bad person overcomes her nature to do good things. The good person is true to her good nature, whereas the bad person is only a fake good person. This question has three possible answers, one given by each of the three apparition specialists who appear throughout the Monogatari series. Yozuru Kagenui takes the stance that the good person has the greatest value. Oshinomeme takes the middle ground, claiming that they have equal value. Finally, Kaikideshu reasons that the fake is of far greater value. In its deliberate attempt to be real, it's more real than the real thing. Nisemonogatari explores the consequences of taking each of these stances. This takes place through the eyes of Araragi, who considers himself a bad person who is trying his best to do good things. As he works through what it means to be a good person, he encounters a con man who cheats middle schoolers, a professional fake, and he discovers that his youngest sister is not who he thought she was. She is a fake sister. But Araragi is the true fake of this story. He is affected the most by whatever evaluation the show produces on the value of a good person who does good things versus the value of the bad person who does good things. And the show does not give an answer. You know what? I'm completely fine with that. There is enough ambiguity for me to make videos like this one, and I don't think a show has any obligation to answer the questions it raises. Sometimes the correct answer simply cannot be told. It must be found, which might take years of struggle. Other times, the answer may be hidden in plain sight, but it is only valuable if the viewer discovers it for herself. In this instance, Nisemonogatari provides three different answers, but doesn't explicitly say which one is correct. Even if it did, that doesn't mean that Nisemonogatari has the final word. More than that, if Nisemonogatari explicitly pushed one of these three answers as the correct one, given the nature of the Monogatari series, it is most likely the case that that is the wrong answer. The Monogatari series as a whole builds and resolves conflict through layers of dialogue. The characters lie and conceal the truth and forget the details of events, or give bad advice that they intended to be good, and generally have all the linguistic faults and errors that I constantly encounter in my own conversations. In spite of this, most of the characters are generally trustworthy, just like most of the people I know. But that doesn't mean I take everything they say at face value. My friends and family almost always give me solid advice that is worth listening to, but sometimes I don't realize this. Or maybe I don't truly understand that it is worth listening to unless I work it out for myself. I could have saved myself a lot of trouble and heartache if I had listened in the first place, but it is really difficult for trust to take the place of knowledge. Araragi plays out this scenario repeatedly in the Monogatari series, and here, in Nisemonogatari, I believe that we, the audience, are invited to join him in working out a solution to the problem for ourselves, instead of taking the answer that is given to us. Here are some of my thoughts on who is more admirable. I'm not sure I believe in such a thing as a good person. From my experience, the good things I do seem either to be an accident or the result of hard work. I'm not sure I've ever done anything good because it was in my nature to do so. Even if I did do something good because it was natural to do it, I'm sure that my good deed was corrupted by ulterior motives like pride or a desire for praise or something like that. But I digress. Even if there was a good person, how could we possibly distinguish them from a fake good person? How could we tell a good person who does good things apart from a bad person who does good things? Aren't you considered a good or bad person because of the things you do? More importantly, how do you determine if you are a good or bad person? I may feel like a good person for a little while after doing something good, but that illusion is quickly shattered. Furthermore, I don't think feelings are conclusive evidence on whether you are good or bad. So how can we know? Even if the Monogatari series does not explicitly give an answer, it does contain some clues. Let's pause for a moment and make a bit of a case study of one of the characters from the Monogatari series, Kaiki Deshu. He is introduced in Nisemonogatari as the con man who preys on middle schoolers' superstitious fears to cheat them out of what little money they have. He is not a good person, rather, he is a bad one. When Araragi's younger sister investigates this shady man with the intention of dissuading him from his evil deeds, she becomes afflicted by an apparition and falls ill, at which point Araragi intervenes. Araragi finds that Kaiki is a despicable human being who cares for nothing other than his own material gain. In addition to cheating the middle schoolers, Araragi discovers that in the past Kaiki cheated a girl named Senjo Gahara Hidagi, who is currently Araragi's girlfriend. At the time, Senjo Gahara was afflicted by an apparition that caused her to lose the majority of her weight. Even though she looked like a normal girl, she only weighed a couple of pounds. Kaiki took large sums of money from her and her family, but failed to cure her and ran off with the money. Even when confronted by Araragi, Kaiki remains unrepentant and unremorseful. Under threat of violence, he promises to leave town and never come back. At first, I despised Kaiki. He makes the perfect villain, cold, heartless, and driven by an internal logic. No matter the situation, he maintains a calm and collected demeanor, and he is absolutely twisted. Yet over time, as he appears in other parts of the Monogatari series, I have found that I have come to respect him, and perhaps to even like his character. Throughout the entire show, how he presents himself doesn't change. At the end of the day, he is still a pretty nasty person. But over time, as his character has developed, I think I have come to understand him a bit. I don't agree with his beliefs, but he does have principles that he lives by, and not all of them are bad. Even though he is a professional con man, he is still a human, which means he can change. At the end of Monogatari's second season, Kaiki reappears. He has not been seen since the events of Nisemonogatari, but Senjo Gahara, Araragi's girlfriend, seeks Kaiki out to ask him for help. He is reluctant to take the job and has plenty of reasons to refuse, not the least of which is that he would be under threat of bodily harm by Araragi. And it doesn't help that plenty of other people from that town remember being scammed by him. And yet, after a bit of persuasion, Kaiki accepts the job. This is the first time in the show that Kaiki agrees to do something that he obviously would rather not do. As the audience, we cannot be entirely sure why he agrees. He doesn't say why, and even if he did, he is a professional con man, so we couldn't take him at his word. Perhaps it is because Kaiki harbors some affection for Senjo Gahara, even though he had cheated her and her family out of a large sum of money. He is adamant that this is not the case, but can we really be sure? He denies that he ever held any affection for Senjo Gahara, though he is convinced that at one point she had fallen for him, something that she is also quick to deny. Whatever the case may be, they have a troubled history, yet Senjo Gahara reached out to him for help. Perhaps Kaiki is motivated by a respect for her boldness, or by some unnoticed sense of guilt. Regardless, his acceptance of her request marks a turning point for his character. He is no longer the same person that was driven out of town by Araragi some months ago. As this arc progresses, the job turns out to be more difficult than Kaiki estimated. It becomes apparent that the job is no longer profitable for him, but he does not give up, even though it means that he must spend a great deal of his own money, and more than that, it comes to the point where his own life is in danger. Yet he perseveres. Perhaps he continues out of a sense of guilt. Maybe he feels that he must make up for his past sins. Whatever the reason, he fights through until the end and manages to resolve the situation. At this point, I saw him as an entirely different person. He is still a con man who makes a living through telling lies, but, perhaps for the first time in his life, he performs a selfless act, a good deed as it were. He is a bad person who did a good thing. He is still a long way off from being a good person, but he is no longer an incarnation of pure evil. Kaiki disappears again from the Monogatari series, but after a while he reappears, and the moral quality of his actions slowly takes a turn toward the better, despite what he says about himself. By the end of the Monogatari series, he has become the person who he esteems, the bad person who does good things through conscious effort. As I was editing this section, the thought occurred to me that this might have been Kaiki's goal all along. He had a firm conviction about what the most admirable person was, and devoted his entire life to becoming that person. It is a twisted idea that you have to become evil in order to become good, but it fits Kaiki's character. This is something he would try to do. The most obvious obstacle to this theory is what Kaiki actually says about himself. He is consistent in his claims that he feels no remorse for any of his actions, and he stands by the choices he has made. But he is a con man. We can't believe what he says about himself. All that we have to go by is what Kaiki does. That is the clearest picture we have of what sort of person he is. In the end, we can only tell if he is a good or bad person by what he does. The distinction between a good person who does good things and a bad person who does good things can only exist if the person under consideration is me, or you, or whoever is asking the question. To anyone else, the person who does good things appears to be a good person. The observer cannot tell if the person is actually good or bad. Only the person in question knows that, or rather feels that. At least in my experience, what I feel about myself shapes my opinion about myself much more than anything that I have done. But is that the way it should be? Am I the best judge of my own character? Do I know who I am the best? Kaiki considers himself to be a bad person. He is a self-proclaimed liar and conman, yet by the end of the Monogatari series, he is solving problems, helping others, giving advice, and generally acting like a good human being. He cannot objectively view his own actions, so his opinion of himself is probably warped and inaccurate. And the same is most likely true of us. At least, I know that I cannot perceive myself the same way that others perceive me. My image of myself differs from the image other people have of me. Which is closer to who I actually am? Which is my true identity? If actions do indeed contribute a large part to identity, who has a clear understanding of my actions? I think the answer has to be other people, not myself. This brings us to a third contributing factor of identity, which is none other than other people. Everyone in your life has a hand in who you are, for good or ill. Likewise, you have a hand in establishing the identity of each of those people. The closer you are, the greater the effect you have on each other. At the end of Zoku Owarimonogatari, Araragi realizes that while observing the mere images of the people dear to him, he has caught a glimpse of an aspect of each of their personalities that he had never seen before. And we, the audience, realize this alongside him. Together with Araragi, we now see the characters in a different light, and in that very act of seeing, each of these characters has a slightly different identity. That identity may have existed in some absolute sense before we saw it, but it didn't exist for us until it became apparent to us. In other words, it didn't matter until we noticed it. Only once it is noticed does it become real. And what if I have an experience that causes me to view myself in a new light? This happens to me with some regularity. A recent example comes from the time I was reading C.S. Lewis's Surprised by Joy. I found a remarkable similarity between his description of what he calls joy and the effect that reading books and watching movies that I love has on me. C.S. Lewis gave me language to express something about myself, and by giving it a name, it became real in a way that it was not before it had a name. My own understanding of myself changed. And what if I am not content with my identity? Can I reject my past mistakes, turn over a new leaf, and become a different person? I have wanted and even tried to do this many times after becoming frustrated with repeated failures and falling short of being the person I aspire to be. But if I reject myself, isn't that the same as rejecting my very identity and existence? Everyone has something they have lost and missed dearly, or something they wish they didn't do, or something that they wish they did do. Most people, maybe even everyone, has some aspect of their personality they despise and do everything in their power to repress and hide it for fear of its discovery driving others away, or perhaps they fear being misunderstood or laughed at, or losing respect and admiration, or damaging a treasured relationship. Yet that part of you, however repressed or hated, is still a part of you. Even if it is private and will never see the light of the sun, it is not something to be ashamed of. It is a part of you even if it is grotesque. There is no such thing as turning over a new leaf. You can't forget about the things that happened to you, and you have no control over your past. But that is nothing to be sad or fearful about. Your identity is not solely up to you. This can make discovering your own identity a difficult task. I have ideals about the way I want to act and the things I want to do, but I often fall short. Who I am is certainly not who I want to be, and I am often surprised by how different the two are. In high school, I had something pointed out to me. You are most aware of yourself when you are under scrutiny by someone else. Being the center of attention, whether of an individual or a group, it doesn't matter, causes you to be aware of yourself in a way that you rarely are when you are alone. I find that I forget about myself when I become absorbed in a task, but it is much harder for me to reach this state of mind when someone else is watching. The same is true if you are working and someone, maybe your boss or a coworker, stops and looks over your shoulder. Whenever this happens to me, I become incredibly self-conscious and I find it extremely easy to make a mistake, or at the very least, what was once easy now becomes a little difficult. It is next to impossible to focus on the task at hand when someone is staring over your shoulder unless you are used to it. The key phrase here is self-conscious. This phrase is almost always used in the context of being in the presence of other people. Can you even be self-conscious when you are alone? I'm not sure the semantics of the English language allow for that sentence to make complete sense. You can only be self-conscious in front of other people. You are only conscious of yourself. You are only confronted by your own identity when you are with other people. So that is the answer to the problem of knowing whether you are a good or bad person. You must have the input and perspective of other people. At the conclusion of Zoku Owarimonogatari, Araragi comes to a conclusion about his identity. His experiences, particularly his shortcomings, mistakes, and regrets, have made him into the person he is, and he can be sure of it because of his memories. Your experiences have an inseparable connection to your identity. You can be sure that your memories are real because they are your memories. There is simply no other way it can be. They certainly aren't someone else's memories. If they were made up, they would probably be a lot better than your actual memories. Who would go through the trouble of meticulously crafting embarrassing memories and childhood trauma and disasters, injuries, sickness, and all the numerous horrible things that we try to forget but never can? What Araragi realizes is that he should be thankful for even the worst of his memories, because that terrible memory is a part of himself, and forgetting it or denying it would be no different from forgetting or denying part of himself. Araragi gains confidence in his identity because of all three of these factors: memory, action, and the people in his life. This video started out as an all-encompassing essay about what the Monogatari series means to me and why I think everyone should watch it, but I was quickly overwhelmed by the scope of this task. I realized that it is impossible to truly express the way this show makes me feel, much less all the small ways this show has influenced how I think and the approach I take towards life. No matter how much I write or how long this video ends up being, I will fail to fully convey all that the Monogatari series is. I will even fail to convey all that the Monogatari series is to me. My journey with this series is irreplaceable. The translation of the word Monogatari is story, and that is just what my relationship with this series is. It is a story about people whom I have come to care about deeply, and whom I feel I know and understand a little bit. Of course, they are fictional characters, but that does not mean they are not real. This show certainly has had a real influence on how I think about myself and my relationships with others. With each new addition to the series, I am excited at the prospect of learning something new about the characters that I have come to love. That is why I love the Monogatari series and why I think you should watch it. Now that I have convinced you that the video is over, I find that I have more to say. At least my script goes on for about another page. The topic of identity has been something close to home for me for more than the past year. I have found myself thinking a lot about what it means to change. I consider myself a completely different person than, say, when I was in high school and maybe even college. So much so that I am starting to have trouble understanding that person who I used to be. In hindsight, I seem stupid and foolish and made a lot of poor choices, but there is good stuff too. Since then, I have improved in many ways and become worse in others, but generally speaking, I do not miss my high school self, and I am happy with the direction I have gone since then. Yet I am scared that 5, 10, 15 years from now, I will stop being able to understand the person who I am now. I fear that the person I will change into is not the same person I am now, and when I am that person, who I am now will be alien to me. This is something that has haunted me and given me a sense of desperation about cementing my own identity, and has caused me to absorb and think about books, movies, and shows like the Monogatari series so that I can find out what other people think about the subject of human identity. A few weeks ago, after taking a rather long break in the midst of writing this script, I suddenly became at peace with the inevitability of change. I was unsure of the direction I wanted to take this video, and so I had some measure of writer's block while I thought through what I really wanted to convey, both to you, my audience, but even more importantly to myself. What do I consider to be the source or foundation of my own identity? In this essay, I have considered the roles memory, action, and other people play in constructing identity, but my fears remained. This is the answer that I came up with. My identity is not up to me. I am much too influenced by the people around me, by my friends, family, and coworkers. The books I read, movies I watch, and activities I do in my free time have much too great an impact on how I think and the way I live for me to think that I am responsible for constructing my own identity. And it has always been like that. I am no longer the person I was in high school because the people in my life and my experiences have forcefully shaped me into a different person. This happens whether I like it or not. And now that I realize that my identity is something completely out of my control and never has been in my control, I suddenly find myself at peace with knowing that my future self will be nothing like my present self. I think I am supported by the Monogatari series when I say this. I am sure many people will not be and cannot be satisfied with this answer, and I suspect that most people will be dissatisfied and upset with the notion that they have no power over their own identity. But for me, I am content to cease worrying about who I am and trust those around me to shape me into something new.